a few minutes, and I'm going to talk a lot. A lot? No, not that much.
Oh, wow, we're live on Facebook now.
I'm live on Facebook now?
Yep.
Is this my... Oh, my gosh. I think this is the first time, or the time before my second time, that I'm actually live on Facebook. Did you think?
Okay, we're good to go.
All right, let's go.
All right. So let me start then. Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Huang, and I'm the chairperson for the 2021 Taiwanese American Heritage Week. And I would like to welcome you all to the Taiwan Oolong Tea Cross Freedom Pineapple Hybrid Tasting. Yay! Taiwanese American Heritage Week is held mainly to praise the Taiwanese American and their contribution to the U.S. economy, culture, and in other fields. To introduce the Taiwanese American heritage to the U.S. social mainstream, and to help our friends to recognize Taiwan and Taiwanese. Furthermore, through the celebration of Taiwanese American Heritage Week, the communications and interactions between Taiwanese American and the other ethnic groups will be promoted. And I would like to thank Taiwan Center, and then we have our chairman Paul Chen online with us. Say hi. And I would also like to thank our Executive Vice Chair Ray Jen for hosting this event. And also, we are honored here today to have Jerry from Oolong Lab to demonstrate us the beauty and the essence of the Taiwan tea. Jerry is an applied physics professor in a day, but today he's our Taiwan tea educator. And I hope you all learn more about Taiwan tea today and then enjoy the snacks. And Jerry, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charles. That was applied physiology, not applied physics. It's a little bit of a difference there. Anyway, moving on. Well, so stereotypically during the day, yes, I'm giving a lecture on what's going on with the human body. But today we're going to focus on Taiwan Oolong. And so before we get started, everyone has boiled their water and started making their 3 teas. And obviously I have them all here. We have the jade, the gold, and the ruby. And what you want to do is plop in your satchel for each one of those and use your 15 or 16 ounce mug, which hopefully everyone has at home. And put one in each, and then put your rolling boiling water in each one of them and have them steep for about 3 minutes. I would say probably 3 minutes or 4 minutes. 3 minutes is actually really good. Okay, and the reason why you do 3 minutes is because you can remove the satchel. We're going to do so afterwards, and then you can steep it again for your second tasting as well for yourself. In the meantime, I'm going to describe to you what I have set up here, and so that you can understand why I have these set up for you. And then we're going to do a stereotypical cupping that we normally do during competitions in Taiwan. We also do some of these demonstrations here in the United States. But for a lot of for comparing teas in Taiwan, especially oolong teas, not black teas, oolong teas, that we want to use these cupping sets specifically in specific size. So what happens is we can actually taste the entire nuances for each of the teas that are being grown and are being presented by the manufacturer or the farmer themselves. And so, for a lot of people who aren't aware of oolong teas, and so there's basically 3 types of tea, basically 3 types. There's green tea, black tea, and there's oolong tea, okay? And so, oh, by the way, before I forget it, as I'm sharing this information, I would like to thank JT&T, Taiwan Center, and Oolong Laboratories and Taiwan Tea Institute for helping me set this up and getting everything for you, okay? So with the 3 teas, the green tea, the black tea, and the oolong tea. So what is unoxidized tea is green tea, which a lot of people have consumed, especially in like Japan and so forth. The black tea is completely or fully oxidized tea, which a lot of people drink in the West, particularly in places like in Britain and so forth, and a lot of places that drink Assam tea and so forth. Those are fully oxidized tea. And everything in between is the oolong tea. And particularly the reason why oolong is so special is that it can have the flavors, the nuances, and all the benefits from the green tea all the way to the black tea, but having all those variances within it. And the reason why Taiwan has been the #1 nation to do oolong tea is because of their processing, of how they basically bring it out to the sun and so forth, growing it and picking at certain seasons, particularly rolling it. It's actually kind of like how they stop the oxidation in the midway of how they're oxidizing. And so how we basically pan fire, heat treat, and which basically denatures the enzymes for stopping to oxidize the leaves, and then process that in order for it can be saved for us to drink later on. And so those are the 3 types of teas. And so let me explain to you what we have and what a lot of people have gotten in their homes. And so what happens is, in order to, most of the time when we actually do cupping, what we have is we have a bunch of loose leaf teas, and I save it in a little jar here, which is kind of vacuum sealed a little bit to kind of get a lot of the oxygen out of the tea. And then we have a tray where we display it, so it's often easier for us to kind of smell it, to smell how nice it is. And most of the time when we smell, we're not really only smelling for the flavors of what we taste, but also if there's any mold growing on it and things like that. If you have any tea at home, we always suggest that you drink your tea. Keep on drinking your tea. And the reason is because when you save it for too long, what happens is if it's not properly stored, it can easily absorb the flavors of the smells in the environment it's stored in. So if hypothetically, if you store it next to garlic or shallots or something like that, it's going to take on the scent of the items that it's going to be stored with. So that can be an issue. Now, the thing is that typically what we have here is, and also the fact that you have to measure it. So often what we do is we have a scale with us at all times, and then we have a timer. And so for all of you that have actually started steeping your tea, I was trying to suggest timing it for 3 minutes for your steeping. If not, you can gauge it. It's up to you. It's not very scientific, so don't worry about that. But the scale, when we do cupping, it is a little bit more scientific. We do measure at scale. We measure roughly about 3 grams into it, and we put in these cups. And then what happens is we steep for 6 minutes. That's what the timer is for here, if you can see the 6 minutes here. And then once everything's done, we decant it, which I will do here later. I'm just explaining to what we're doing. We decant it into a bowl, and then we can drink from there. Now, the thing is that what I've done earlier, before we even start, was already steep the satchels, the pouches, into mason jars. And the reason I did it in mason jars specifically is because here in the United States, they're very easily to be purchased, they're relatively inexpensive, and they're see-through, so you can see the colors, what it looks like. So that's actually very, very helpful. And so particularly you see the jade very easily, and then the gold, and obviously definitely the ruby. And so the jade is mimicking a lot of like the lower oxidation teas that we might find in green teas and so forth. And in the higher oxidation, we have the ruby, which is what we typically take as darker teas and so forth. Now, one of the things that people don't realize over the types of teas we have is we can often use them to pair the foods that we want to eat. And so that can be very helpful. I'm going to start boiling the water here on the side so I can start the cupping sets of what we normally typically do. Now, often what happens is when I have it in the tray, we actually can have a spoon or something like that, and we put it on a scale, measure our 3 grams, and then we actually enter in each one of our cupping sets. And then what happens is these are set in such a way that each of these cupping sets have a little ridge on the bottom, so that it allows it to drain out much easier. And so what I've done is that instead of having the mess of cleaning up all the kind of the loose leaves, what we often use here for ourselves is we have it in satchels, right? So what you have in each one of these canisters, we have these satchels. And what's so good about these satchels is that, number one, they're actually very high quality, number one, all from Taiwan. And some of them are estate teas. So we actually are trying to brand a new set of estate teas as well, specifically for certain plantations. The other thing we're also doing is the satchels they're in, particularly these satchels, you can see through them, they're kind of little webbing. These are made of polyacetic acid. So what happens is they biodegrade at the same rate as the tea leaves. So if you feel like, caution about like, oh my God, what should I do with the bags and so forth? No problems. They will biodegrade with the tea leaves. Unlike a lot of the modern day tea bags we have today, number one, they're mostly made of powder. So what's basically all the tea leaves have been crushed, and all the bottom parts is what they save and put on the bags. And then on top of that, the bags are often glued, which is not so good, as well as or stapled. Two things you don't want to combine with your hot water as you're dissolving it into the hot water and then consuming that in a hot beverage into our body. So one of the biggest things that we're always concerned about is the quality of tea, number one, and number two, is there any health benefits? And I'm not really going to sit here and go through all the health benefits, but because we often drink tea because most so for our enjoyment rather than, for, hey, my gosh, is this going to benefit us? And actually, tea has been shown, a lot of scientific data has shown that it's been very beneficial for our own health. Now, for the type of water you want to use is you want to have rolling boil water. So what I have done is I've already done so here. I'm going to pour some into each one of these to the brim of these, and I'll start talking. Okay, and set my timer for 6 minutes. 6 minutes and ready to go. And so what we've done here is that one of the things about the Oolong teas that we've been using, we have our estate teas, and especially coming specifically from Taiwan, we want to make sure that the quality is really there. So we actually talk to our farmers. We want to make sure that they are producing things more in a an eco-friendly environment and so forth. So the pesticides is reduced, or actually natural types of insect control and so forth. But very interestingly, we actually need those insects because what happens is they actually, make sure they actually pierce the leaves of the leaves, and they actually change the chemistry of the leaves. And that's what actually brings out a lot of the sweetness that we might find in Oriental Beauty and so forth. That's one of the main teas that actually a lot of people seek after, the Oriental Beauty in Taiwan. And those were actually first sent roughly about 200 years ago here into the United States. And they went actually into New York. And it was a strange story was that because the tea was actually the leftovers from the farmers that they were afraid to kind of show and deliver. And the reason that was because they didn't look very pretty, to be honest with you. And typically when buyers of teas, and especially in large quantities, when they look at the tea, they are kind of looking for, is it a round shape because if it's rolled in a bowl and so forth? Are there stems in there because they think that it won't carry the same flavor and so forth as the actual leaves? The stems actually do have some flavor. They do some benefits as well. But obviously the full colorization may not be seen when you're not using the leaves. So a lot of people get a little confused and so forth with that. But they like to have the pretty rolled oolong balls of tea. So that a lot of people don't make sure that quality is really high there. But to be honest with you, all that can actually be steeped in water. And a lot of the flavors not only comes from how it's being grown in nature, it's also where it's located. Here, in Taiwan, what happens is we have a huge range of mountain regions from really high mountains to low mountain ranges, and also the air that's blowing in, especially the humid air that's blowing in. And also how the irrigation and the hydrology of the soil is really critical. And so because of that reason, all the different types of environments that we have in Taiwan allows us to grow such amazing, such varieties of teas, along with the vegetation that's growing next to the tea. What a lot of people haven't really talked about is the other plantations that are there, especially like fruit plantations of mangoes and other fruits that are grown. And because of this reason, we have a lot of cross-pollination with the bees that actually infuse a lot of the flavors into the teas that we have. And so what often people assume is that oolong is flavored in that sense. There are a lot of teas out in the market that are flavored, but we don't do that here at Oolong Labs nor at JT&T, and because they're all naturally flavored from nature. On top of everything else, a lot of people like to consume a lot of herbal teas. For just FYI, herbal teas they don't have any tea leaves in there. They actually are mostly made of like fruits and dry flowers and so forth. That's why they're low in caffeine, if not no caffeine. Any type of tea you're going to always have trace amounts, if not high amounts of caffeine in there. And so that's what may give a little bit of that little stringent flavor as well. Some of that bitter flavor that you taste in a tea, that's usually the caffeine. And then every time if you take astringent flavor in your teas, that's usually the vitamin C that's encompassed in our tea. And so what happens is, so the reason why we've made the satchels for everyone is that, number one, you don't have to measure the scale, the mass of it every single time regularly. And here in the United States, because a lot of people are on the go, you want to make sure your tea is made quickly, and then you can pour your tea, do the timer, and then throw out the satchels when you're done. And so what I've done also here is that not only have a display of tea, but I also have a little tray. So what happens is when we're done, we can actually clearly take each one of them out if we have time and so forth. But usually in our cupping set, we don't really need that because they just drain into the bowls itself. Now, the thing is that when we talk about the oolong teas, what happens is we often think about where they're from. And we basically talk to our farmers regularly. We talk to our plantation owners. We also talk to our manufacturers. And the reason why this is because when we have an understanding of all the processes of tea, we actually know the type of tea we're getting, number one, the quality of tea we're getting, and also the flavors we want out of each one of those teas. And because it takes time for us to think, well, what are we in the mood for? And what is a setting for? And that's something that people don't realize about tea, which is maybe different from other beverages. Most people take a beverage, a hot beverage, it's on the go because they want to get awakened quickly and move on with their day. Tea is a little bit different, and oolong specifically is a little different, is because it creates a nuance of the ambiance we want to create in our environment. What is our environment? Is it stressful? Is it calming? Is it middle of the day? What are we doing during that time frame? And having that correct mindset helps us decide on what type of tea we're going to consume during that time. Or are we pairing with something else? Is it kind of helping us along with the day? And does it help us with our stomach and so forth? And how do we feel about the tea once we drink it? And it takes some time for that, because knowing the different types of tea gives us a better understanding and feeling about what we like and what we don't like. Now, many years ago, oh, there goes the timer. I'm going to stop the timer there. I'm going to decant everything. All right, as that's decanting, now the thing is that many years ago, I had a roommate in grad school, and he was learning how to go wine tasting. And I remember he read a book that told him, that basically stated to him that if you like really, really, really expensive wine, it's really, really difficult. You're gonna have a difficult life. If you don't care about the wine you drink, that's the best, because what happens is you don't really care. And whatever it is, you'll like the flavor and you'll consume it and you'll like it. But if you have a very delicate palate and very sensitive palate, then you start wanting the things that you particularly want, but only for that moment, only for you, or only to share with your friends and family or loved ones. So the reason I bring that up is because when you start learning about what type of flavors you enjoy and what you like to pair it with, and we can actually help you with that, is it gives us a better understanding of what you like consuming regularly. And so what happens is with all of us, we start learning, as we get older, and I'm talking about when you're children. When we're children, we like a lot of things that are a little bit more sweet, to be fully honest with you. And the reason that is because mother's milk is a little sweet. And so that's always a sweet tooth in a kid. But what happens is as we mature, we actually start, our taste buds start developing. It depends on what we taste and the different things we taste, and we start maturing how we drink. And so what happens is most of the time what we have is that when we have these different types of teas, we want to also not only decant it, but we also want to kind of smell it. So often what we often do is we shake the leaves inside here, and then what happens is we open the lid in order to kind of inhale to taste the flavor, right? And so what we did with the first one was the ruby, and then the second one is actually the gold, nice, very nice, and then the jade, very, very nice. And so I'm sorry, we don't have smell-o-vision, so you can't really kind of detect on what I'm actually smelling. Now, the thing is that for most of you may know that when we taste food, okay, when we eat food, roughly about 70 to 80% of that is actually that flavor is coming through our nasal passages because our olfactory nerves are actually soaking that up with the nasal passages. So inside our nasal concha, we have multiple folds of membrane and tissue to kind of absorb those compounds of those chemicals that are kind of being thrown out as the heated tea is kind of like making that more aerosol. And so often when we taste teas, we want to slurp it, slow amounts of it, and let it roll over your tongue and slurp it. And the reason that is that slurping is about kind of creating, not only covering your tongue, but it also aerosolizes in the back of your mouth where it actually connects to your nasal passages. Now, you don't want to do so much where it kind of comes out of your nose, obviously, but you want to have enough so that what happens is you can have to experience a full taste in the flavors. Now, I don't know if the angle might be a little bit off here about seeing the colors here, but I want to kind of describe to you what I'm actually gonna, what I see and what I smell as well. Now, we're gonna drink in this fashion. We're gonna go from jade to gold, then to ruby. And the reason that is because just very similarly that you would drink wines, you want to go from the lighter colored wine to the darker colored wine, because what happens, the flavors become more intensely strong on our palates. And so what happens is it takes us time to kind of take each one and take a little time to absorb it easily. If you want, you can also go around with a cup of water as well. And the reason that is helpful is because it clears your palate. And I learned that because years ago when I was in grad school, my advisor was a big Scotch drinker. And we always had along with Scotch, we always had a glass of water with it. And that often was a cleanser of palate. So what happens, it does not kind of cover or disdain the other tastes of the other flavors that we're tasting from the other types of teas. Okay, so let me start with the jade here. And what happens is I'm going to tell you what I smell at first, because that's the thing that you may experience at home later on when you're looking and smelling the actual bags itself or the satchels and so forth. If you smell it, what we often smell is a little bit of grassy flavor, okay? And now you want that. But at the very end of the grassy scent is a sweet tone about it. And for me, right, when I taste it, and just FYI, just so you guys understand that everyone's taste buds is different. Just because I say so, that I taste it, you might taste it and feel a little different. So do not be afraid to go and try them out and see how you like them, or you might not like it, to be honest with you. And that actually is you understanding how your body tastes tea, especially oolong with so many different flavors, right? And so as I shake it, I do smell the grass, but at the end of the tone, you'll also smell this sweet flavor of there's like sugar cane kind of sweetness at the very end. With the gold, it's a little bit, for me, it has this rich kind of like oaky flavor of things that have been soaking in oak or some sort of woodsy flavor for it. And it has a malty flavor to it. When you taste it later on, we're also going to taste a caramel flavor without the sweetness or light sweetness. And then if you smell the ruby, you'll definitely see it's a little bit different because it's very much like black tea. But this one particularly, and why it's so special, is because it has a mixture of the mint and cinnamon together, fused together in that same scent. So it kind of brings out this, whoa, this is much different from the stereotypical oolongs that we're normally used to. So let's start drinking our teas. Why don't we start doing that, okay? And so we'll start with the jade, okay? You start doing the jade. Again, my strong suggestion is to slurp your tea and to take it in, and you don't have to do it in one slurp. You can take a slow slurp and do a couple slurps. Don't do it all at once. Don't choke. Take your time. Now, we often do this even during the tasting. And the whole point of it is to cover our tongue. I want the tea to cover all of my tongue, number one, and have a slurp to kind of give that flavor. Now, this is really one of the most sought after, having the lighter teas, like basically you want that lighter teas like jade. And the reason that is because it's so light. You can have it on a hot summer day, number one. Number two, it's really not only the first slurp that really kind of gives you the flavor. It's really the seconds after the first slurp, that's what you want to look for. And the reason is because you might taste that grassy sensation in the beginning, but what happens is near the end, there's a sweet tone at the very end, almost like a sugar cane tone, kind of like a cane sugar, a little bit sweetness at the very end. And it's very, very light. So that's why it's easy for using this type of tea to pair with a lot of different kind of lighter foods that we don't want to kind of change the flavor so much. So that's why Jade comes to be very clear, right? It's much clearer than the other ones. And it's very light and actually goes well with your day-to-day. So often a lot of people drink this tea in the morning, or that's right, to get them up straight up away. And actually, I'm going to drink some from the mason jar itself. Nice, very, very nice and pleasant, very clear as a palate because it's so light in flavor. Now let's move on to the gold, right? And now the gold oolong, well, the reason why, this is my all-time favorite. Out of all three, this happens to be the most favorite for me personally. And the reason is because I can drink this all day. And a lot of people do drink this all day, okay? And the reason is it is strong enough to give that caramel flavor. And I'm going to slurp that right now. So if where I want to go, let's go for that slurping flavor. Now that's wonderful. Now here again, you want to wait a few, let it roll over your tongue, number one. Number two, let it wait a few more seconds to kind of taste that light caramelly flavor at the very end. Before I forget, one of the things that when you're drinking tea is to let it kind of breathe in, kind of sip it, right? Slurp it in, drink it, and then feel your tongue with the top of your mouth, and then see if you can recognize the tone, the flavors of it. And so what happens is when you get more into different types of oolongs, there are going to be a lot of oolongs that carry a lot more kind of like flowery, floral flavors and so forth. So we can have a little nutty flavors or malty flavors and so forth. And that's what makes everyone kind of enjoy those oolongs particularly. When you have green teas and black teas, we really don't get that. And the reason that is because the green teas are oversaturated in flavor of the grassy taste. So that's all you taste, right? And it might have a little bit of stringiness, which again has the vitamin C and so forth. And it might taste a little bit tart as well. When you have black teas, it's so fully oxidized. The flavor is almost overpowering. And often it's also very low in pH or very acidic, or not very acidic, but it's slightly acidic. So often what a lot of Europeans have done is they've added milk to buffer the acidity of the tea so it doesn't taste as bitter because of the caffeine as well as the acidic that might upset the stomach as well. So that's why I like the gold as my favorite, basically, but I also love them all three. And it depends on what time of day I'm drinking or what I'm eating, I will pair each one. So like I said, from the gold, we should have this like slight kind of like caramel flavor at the very end of sweetness as it rolls off your tongue. Slurp it, take your time with it. Do not rush this process. Unlike if you're drinking coffee, it is a to-go kind of when drinking coffee, it's like I'm on the go. I need to get this done type of mentality when you're drinking coffee. When it comes to tea, it's about enjoying it and it's for yourself to kind of be in the moment for that tea. And then let's go on to the ruby. And so what happens, let's take a slurp here from the ruby. Wow, nice, very nice. For me, this one, the sweetness is at the very end, in the beginning, and right afterwards, it's followed by the cinnamon and the mint mixture blend flavor to that. Now, the reason this one, for a lot of people, they like to drink a lot of darker teas and so forth, higher oxidized teas. This is the suggestion to go for all the time, without any doubt. But if you're also pairing it with food, the strongest suggestion is that if you're eating food heavier, more oily and so forth, definitely go with the ruby. And I'm going to try it from the mason jar. Very nice, very nice. Now, if you notice, if you time yourself correctly, you won't get most of that bitterness. Now, to be honest with you, when as a child, when my dad or my mom made tea, oolong tea at home, it was often oversteeped and it tasted really bitter. And I often questioned myself, why am I drinking this bad tasting, bitter, brown liquid? I often asked myself that question a lot as a kid, to be honest with you. And it took me some time to kind of explore and understand what tea was about and about oolong that made me not only appreciate oolong tea, but to love it. And the reason I say this is because when you start using your timer correctly and the amount of tea correctly, you understand you're not overloading your tea, number one, with just bitter, poor quality tea. But what we're doing is we're kind of extracting only the essence of the tea that we need, that we want from the tea, and then we can re-steep it again. So what often people do is because we tend to forget our time, and I'm definitely guilty of that. And the reason is because if we put tea leaves into our container and then we steep it and then we forget to time it, what happens? It becomes oversteeped. And so what happens is the poor quality teas, you'll really taste the bitterness come out. You really do. And that tends to be a problem. When you actually time it correctly, you don't do that, number one. Number two, when you have high quality, you definitely don't do that. And on top of everything else with higher quality tea, what happens is you can steep for not only a second time, but even a third time. Definitely with our satchels, you can definitely steep a second time to help you along with a lighter flavor and so forth. And because of the fact that these are in satchels, what happens is you'll see the tea, there's plenty of room in the satchel for the leaves to unfurrow. That's actually very critical here. And the reason that is because most of the time when we buy bag tea, what happens is you're just steeping it and just kind of like getting the whatever you can get out of that tea bag and then throwing it out. What we want is that hot rolling boiled water. And you want that to kind of let the leaves to unfurrow completely, to actually exude out, to extract out all the quality we want from it, the flavor and so forth. And you often see, if you look at your tea, if you actually let them sit out for a while, you might see little oil, like thin oil droplets out of it. And that's actually natural. That happens often. And especially with a lot of our teas, what happens is it also depends on the quality of the water we use. So in the lab, we have a reverse osmosis system in the lab. And then also at home, we use a lot of reverse osmosis or spring water. Now, and not everyone lives next to a brook or next to a spring, so they can't go out there with a pail or a bucket and then bring that home to boil. So it's often better to kind of get high quality water, have rolling boil water, and then when you pour it, make sure it's hot rolling boiling when you're boiling through. So you want the tea leaves to unfurl properly and have the timing to be correct. So what happens is then you can decant it and remove the leaves once the timer is done, and then take your time to sip your teas. Now, there's a big difference when people are sipping cold tea or tea that's been decanted and actually let it cool down as opposed to hot teas. I often drink them both ways, and the reason that is because when it's hot, what happens is I want to see right away what's going on with my cupping set right away. But often what happens is a lot of people can hide a lot of flavors that are in the hot tea. When you have cold tea, it's really kind of unmasked in that sense. So what happens is if you have tea that's been sitting around for quite some time, you actually can have some of the flavors kind of dissipate because the ones that they want to artificially flavor there kind of dissipate away. And so what happens, it allows us to kind of taste the true flavor when it allows it to cool down, number one. Number two, it's not so harsh or burning sensation on our tongue. So that really is very helpful. So how are we doing on time? Are we doing good on time? Okay, do we want to start with any questions or anything like that? Or can I continue on? I can continue on, great. So often what happens is when we have the satchels, what happens is when the leaves are in furrow, a lot of the nuances that come out with the flavor. And so what happens is when you have higher oxidation, what happens is you'll see the color change drastically, right? And then what happens is when you have lighter oxidation, you don't see the color change as much. I mean, maybe very little. And what happens is you want to make sure that that is completely stirred into it so we have a uniform flavor into this. That's why we often use a cupping set and we decant everything as well. Now, the thing is that one of the things I didn't do was instead of measuring out every single thing, each of our packets or our satchels here is about 2.75 grams, or that's roughly 3 grams. And so that's what I've used for each one of these. So what happens is, let's take each one of them out, and we can see what the satchels look like, right? And so what happens is, now if you look at the satchels, what happens is you notice that there was plenty of room for them to kind of unfurl, the leaves to unfurl. And obviously, because of the fact that you steeped it one time, like for 3 minutes or so forth, you're saying, oh, what do I do with this? So I just throw it out. No, you don't need to do that. Some people can, if you want to. You can get a new satchel if you want to. But you can re-steep this. That's what most people don't know. And the reason is because we're accustomed to other tea brands that actually you steep it once and you throw out the tea bags. With the TZ satchels, what happens is, because this is really high quality tea, so you can re-steep it again, but for what? A little bit longer time. It's the same amount of time as well. And the reason why you want to use the same amount of time, you can even use less time, depending on how strong the flavor you want. And the reason why that is because originally, when it's normal oolong is already wrapped, or they're kind of balled around because they've been compressed for a long time. When you add hot water, what happens is the water does two things. Number one, it lets the leaves absorb it. That's the unfurling process. But the unfurling process also releases all the flavors of it as well. And because it's already unfurrowed or open, the leaves have opened, what happens is when you're adding more hot water, rolling boil hot water, into it, what happens is you don't have to wait for that unfurrowing process. It's already unfurrowed. So what happens, the flavor will come out even further. Now, the thing is that do not use color as the only measurement of what you want for your tea. Even though they might have those brilliant colors, what happens is the flavor may not be there. That's what can be a problem. And so a lot of lower quality teas, once you steep it, it might look amazing, but when you taste it, the flavor is gone. And that tends to be a problem. So often a lot of people have had tea stored in their cupboards and so forth, in their pantries, and even in their drawers for long periods of time. If you take that tea out and it's not stored properly, guess what? The flavor is often gone, right? So that tends to be a big problem. Yes, I do like mason jars. Number one, they're relatively inexpensive for me. There is an oxygen absorber inside of it as well, a packet in there, and a water absorber as well. So it keeps these really dry in there. And then obviously these are sealed. They have a sealing effect here, if you can hear it. Those little pop sound. And the reason that is because I want to save my teas for longer periods if I don't drink that tea into completion in one sitting or in a week. And so what happens, I have a variety of teas at home. So depending on the time of day, how I'm feeling, what I'm drinking, or what I'm eating, and what am I going to pair it with. So we can definitely have also a different session on how do we pair with food. So we can definitely do that. That's very easy to do. Now, the thing is that as I'm decanting each one of these, right, or removing the satchel from each one of them, what happens is you want to also take a scent. So what happens is if you haven't gotten this smell from the teacup, the cupping sets, you can actually take each one of these satchels and smell it yourselves. And you smell the cinnamon and mint flavor, the rich kind of like oaky flavor of this, kind of a woodsy kind of caramel mixture into this. And then last but not least, which is our jade here, right? And the jade will have this grassy flavor to it. Now, the reason I love all these, particularly these three, is that we have a variety of different types of oolongs, obviously. And you can vary with season, with year, and definitely different plantations as well. The reason why we've only selected these three in particular because it makes us have an easier day. Not everyone's going to have time to measure or have a scale or measure their teas. They're not often going to have a timer to wait for that tea. And so they want to have something to go on the go. So in order to match that to go or on the go mentality or on the go lifestyle, we've actually created these TZ pouches for us to put in our mugs or our drinking containers, our tumblers and so forth as we go about our day. It is measured to the correct amount, so you don't have it's pre-measured. Number one, it also has a biodegradable satchel along with it. And then guess what? You can re-steep it or continue to steep it throughout the entire day. One of the things I didn't bring out today was the Gai one. And we can often use, a lot of people in Taiwan or in Asia use the Gai one for their purposes. And you can take each one of these satchels and pouches and put it in your Gai one, fill it in with your boiling water or thermos with their boiling water, let it steep for only a couple minutes, not even 3 minutes, to be honest with you, because you don't want to wait there for too long. And then you decant it completely, right? Drink it out of a different cup, and then refill when you're ready. Put another set of boiling water into that Gai one, let it steep for another couple of minutes, and then decant it in and drink it slowly throughout the entire day. The whole process of drinking tea isn't to guzzle as much tea as possible. That's not the entire purpose. The whole process of drinking tea is to sip it, to slurp it, and to enjoy it and be in the moment. Really, that's what it is about the appreciation of oolong tea. A lot of people are on the go, and I understand that. I live a busy life, I guess, such as everyone else, but everyone else needs to take that on for themselves. And that's what the culture of tea is about, is to understand the ambiance of the mood you're in that moment, and to appreciate what we have in front of you and the treasures that come from Taiwan. And so hopefully this short session, which has only been 45 minutes or 30 minutes, has been going for us to kind of make sure we can enjoy that. So another thing you should also consider before we forget, is also the temperature in the room. And what happens is, if the room is a little bit colder, what happens is our tea obviously is going to cool down faster. And so you want to maintain that rolling boil when you're steeping your tea. And what happens is, if the change in temperature happens too quickly, you're not going to get all of the flavors out of the tea leaves. So that can be a problem. As well as, what is the container we're using. Glass is not ideal, to be fully honest with you. The reason why glass is not ideal, unless it's double walled, is because it doesn't hold the temperature well. Water temperature dissipates really quickly, so that tends to be a problem. We often suggest ceramics, which hold the temperature a little bit better. And obviously there are different types of ceramics. I think the best one is like bone china. So that's really one of the higher end types of ceramics you can use. But the reason I use glass, especially mason jars, is because number one, it's easy to buy at a store here in the United States. And also you can see the colors really well, especially against a kind of a white or very light background like we see here. In mugs, they're great because they often hold temperature really well, and that is very, very helpful for us. And so what happens is, if you want the warm beverage and consume it throughout the day, obviously that can be a problem. Here's another caution as well. If you have tea and you reheat it, what happens is, don't forget, a lot of the water is being evaporated throughout the course of the day, and because the water being evaporated, that flavor can be more concentrated as well. So often a lot of people will add a little bit more water, and also if flavor is a little bit too strong, they also add in more hot boiling water to that cup in order to kind of lighten the flavor as well, or lighten the intensity of the flavor. If you feel like the flavor is not as strong, go ahead, put the satchel back in, put the pouch back in, steep it for a little bit longer, and then really adjust that. So the thing is that when it comes to real oolong, what happens is when you have loose leaf tea, which is definitely needed, is trying to find that harmony code. And we often use that term. It's been coined by Thomas Shu over at JT&T. That flavor, that harmony code, is very critical, and it's different for everyone. Just so you know, it's different for every tea. Okay, every oolong. It's different for every type of container you're steeping it in. Okay, and it's also different in the room that you're steeping it in, and also you as yourself tasting it. Right, the temperature can change and so forth. And what that harmony code is about is do we need to steep it longer or shorter? Do we need more leaves or less? You want to kind of maintain that consistency when it comes to the amount of tea. So that 3 grams is actually very standard for a lot of cupping sets, right? But also the cup you're using, how much water we're using. Is there too much water? There's too little water. That harmony code is very critical for each one of us if we're very particular about the flavor of tea that we want. So for us, what happens is, in the lab, what we often do is we have a standard cupping set of 3 grams in each cup, and then we steep it for 6 minutes straight, and then we decant it after 6 minutes. Now the thing is that after we're done doing our cupping, we often in the lab ourselves, like, what do we personally like, right? To standardize one thing is important. And the reason that is because during competitions, contests between different farms or different farmers or different manufacturers and different brands and different types of teas, what happens is we want to make sure that that is consistent no matter what type of tea they give us, right? But when it comes to actually our personal tasting, what happens is you have to figure that out for yourselves. And it takes time, because what happens is we don't want to just, hey, if we're going to make food, right? Let's say we're making eggs, a fried egg. Well, do you want it sunny side up? You know, do you want it over easy? Do you want it fried? Do you want it scrambled? There's so many various variations of it. And because of that reason, it takes us time to figure out the type of teas that we want, number one. Number two, how do we prepare it? And then the hardest part, realistically, is how do we prepare it to the way we like consistently? That is, if you want to be a master at tea, because I'm only sharing information, I'm an educator. All I do is to share the information with everyone else. I'm not a tea master by any means. And the reason that is because it takes time and practice. You can all be your own tea master. But what it does take for you to get to that point is to understand the types of teas you like, okay? It could be a particular plantation. It could be the variants of oxidation, okay? It can also, but you also need to know what containers you're using consistently. Number two, how is your water? Is your water source consistent as well? And how long do you need to steep it for the strength and flavor that you enjoy? Because at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy it, don't drink it. You have to enjoy the beverages that you consume. And that is especially so when it comes to oolong tea. You have so many varieties, so many choices to go through, right? From things that can taste similar to green teas, to the ones that can similar to black teas, and everything in between, that entire spectrum. And the one teas that we didn't really present here are the big teas. And that's another session altogether. I actually gave a 3 or 4 hour session at the World Tea Expo. Thomas and I gave a 3-4 hour session at the World Tea Expo on big tea. And so it takes a long time to kind of process this. So do not rush it. Take your time, try as often as you like, try as many different types as you like, and go with the things that you enjoy and you love. And so understanding tea is about me learning to love tea. So please take your time, number one. Number two, try as many teas as you can. And 3, pick the best oolong you can get. Okay? So I'd actually like to open up some questions. Is that good? Why don't we do some questions so we can get things on a roll if there's any chatting questions or so forth. I can't see any questions, so. Okay. There was a question earlier on. So one was, I think, what is the best tea for something? I remember. Well, I think someone asked me, like, oh, what is the best tea for chicken nuggets or something like that? That was a question I remember. Someone asked me that earlier today. So one of the things about, if you want to ask questions, you can write in the chat as well. I forgot to say that. It depends. So chicken nuggets is chicken, so it's a lighter meat. So often a lot of people like to use a lighter or lower oxidation tea, so the jade works well with it. The thing is that how much bread it is and how deep fried and how much oil is in the chicken nugget. I know that's a little bit complex for just a simple chicken nugget. If it's oily, we often suggest a darker or higher oxidation ruby. And the reason that is because it can kind of mask or kind of interact with the oils or the heavy oils that you're deep frying in. For a lot of red meats or for consuming, if you're eating like steak and so forth, I love the ruby, works really well. Chicken and fish, obviously the jade works very well. My all-around favorite, obviously, is the gold. And the reason is because I drink, I do drink this often. I drink this kind of all day long. But do I start off the morning with the jade? I do. Later on, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I do start off with a little bit of the ruby. And it also depends on the food I'm consuming during for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or even the snacks in between. If you have something that's very strong in flavor, obviously, ruby. Very light in flavor, obviously, the jade. all-around beverage. What I often do, and I carry around with me, in a couple weeks, I've been asked by my team down in Lake Elsinore to bring some tea. So I will bring a giant thermos of gold, steep gold into my thermos as I bring to my team as we practice jumping out of the sky. So my skydiving team has asked for me to bring some tea because our team is called Oolong, Team Oolong. So we're ready to go for that. Often a lot of people also ask me, well, what do we have? Is the caffeine too much for us? Right? It really depends on everyone realistically. A lot of the darker ones have, because they're richer, they can have a lot more stronger flavor. And what happens is there also can be a significant amount of caffeine in it as well. All the teas do have caffeine, but it's nowhere as close as black coffee. So don't be afraid of that. You do need to watch yourselves. I mean, to be honest with you, you're your own best judge of how your body works. So what happens is if there's a tremendous amount of, if you're very sensitive to caffeine, especially late on in the day, you want to get an early night's sleep, caffeine is not helpful. So either dilute it down, okay, or not drink tea at all, to be honest with you, or any type of tea or coffee during that time frame. A lot of people are very sensitive to teas. Over the years, it depends on how I'm feeling that day. If I need to stay awake a little bit longer, I will break out a tea, to be honest with you. But I do sleep well with a little bit of caffeine in my bloodstream, so that's okay. Everyone's a little different that way. We often do have tastings over at JT&T. We often have these satchels ready online already, so you can go on oolonglabs.com to look for these satchels. Number one, there's also, you can look up their YouTube channel. You'll see me basically talking about the different types of temperatures that are qualified. They're only like two minute long roughly, so they're easily to watch, and you can kind of look for them yourselves and figure out what you enjoy and so forth and things like that. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. Okay, another question?
So the first is that does Oolong Labs offer any other classes of tasting?
We don't usually do. We can do it. We do that because I'm a faculty member at a university and college. I have yet to do it at the college, to be honest with you. I have yet to do it at the college. I've been asked. I just have been very busy. I've been overloaded with classes, online classes, and obviously for the past year, we've been doing a lot of distance education. So we haven't been doing things online. I can definitely do that. That's not a problem. It has to fit the schedule correctly. So in between my lecture sessions and my seminar, I give a weekly seminar over in Washington, D.C. for other things that has nothing to do with tea, unfortunately. So that can be arranged. We do tea tasting on special events. So Thomas and I have gone out to special tea events that we do it at, we'll give seminars, definitely at the World Tea Expo or the LA Tea Festival. He does more festivals than I do. We do it for like Taiwanese Heritage Festival every once in a while. We do it. It's just not, we just have to put it on the calendar. It has to fit our schedules realistically. Okay, I hope that answers the question.
There's one more question.
Yep.
Why do you suggest boiling water for these teas?
What?
Why we need to boil water?
Oh, we need to boil water.
Why?
Okay, water is essential. Okay, essential. And I'm here in Southern California. So when you live in a desert climate, what happens is it depends on where the water source comes from. Okay, we live in a desert climate, and Los Angeles is a desert climate, if you don't know. What happens is our aquifer has a lot of minerals in it, so what we call hard water. So that's why when you wash your glassware, you have like these white droplet stains on it, what we call water stains. And it's basically, calcium carbonate. It's calcium deposits that we get from our minerals that's percolating through our soil that goes into the aquifer. And what happens is, if you want to get rid of that, just get some vinegar, which is a mild acid, and it's diluted acidic acid, and basically it just melts away those white stains on the glassware. The reason why that is that it can affect the way we taste our teas. And so having low quality tea can be an issue, number one. The reason we boil it and having a rolling boil is that it maintains that temperature at 100 degrees Celsius longer, or 212 Fahrenheit, right? And you want to maintain that temperature longer. So what happens is you're consistent with the water that we pour in has contact with the actual tea leaves itself. Now, the thing is that the reason why we use rolling boil as opposed to like certain green teas that you have in Japan that you need below below boiling point. And the reason that is because those leaves tend to be a little bit more delicate. And what happens is when you use rolling boil, that consistency allows, number one, the leaves to unfurrow, and you want to let it unfurrow as much as possible if you want to extract everything out of the leaves, number one. And number two, you also want to extract all the flavors out of it. If you use cold water or cold brew tea, what happens is that there's very little surface contact with the water. And so often what they often do, well, they grind the tea leaves, basically tea powder, which is the lowest quality of tea at the bottom of your container, basically. And no offense. So what happens is you want to have more contact with the water in order to extract the flavors out of the tea material. So having rolling boiled hot water allows all the kind of like all the like kind of amino acids and so forth, the flavors as well as the nuances, especially the amino acids. The amino acids that come out of it are really particular. I'm not going to sit here and give a scientific seminar here, so we won't go through that. But one of those things, especially for like the jade, there's a particular light of jade type of oolong that is very, very light, but it gives off a milky flavor at the very end. And you can actually taste the milky flavor. It's not artificial, it's actually naturally there. And the reason is because you have, galactose in there, basically gives a little bit of a milky flavor we often find in milk that we have, the amino acids in milk. And so what happens is having these type of proteins come out of the leaves, proteins are made of amino acids. And so what happens is all these things kind of come out of the flavor of the tea, gives us this kind of like amazing flavor from each one. So having hot rolling boiled water is essential when it comes to good tea, okay? All the cold brew is not really there, to be honest with you, and you're getting probably the minimal bit amount. So how they supplement minimal amount of flavor, they keep on adding low quality tea to it, and that's what you often get. So that's what tends to be a problem. Sorry about that. So if anyone's kind of like, oh, about their teas, that's what tends to be a problem, okay? Anything else?
Yeah, so I tried the boiled tea with Mr. Coffee Maker.
Okay.
What do you think?
Okay.
Good practice.
So the problem with Mr. Coffee Maker is if you use it for coffee before, that tends to be a problem, number one. And what happens is you might mix it with the coffee flavor. So that coffee residue is going to be there. And that residue, that kind of like this. So there's a couple things that you should know. When it comes to like the white stains that you have around a lot of your boiling water or your coffee kettle, is two things. Number one, it can be the calcium carbonate from your water. The other thing is that the white crust can also be caffeine. Caffeine, when it's dried out, is a white crystal, number one, okay? Number two, sorry. So that tends to be a problem. So let's say, for example, if you have a kettle and what happens is the bottom of it will crust up with that calcium carbonate. And if it's dissolved, it will enter into your tea, and that will compromise the flavor of your tea. So having a Mr. Coffee Maker, what happens is that heating element that it boils water, a lot of people don't clean that often. And that's what tends to be a problem. How do you clean that? Literally soak it in vinegar. That's what you do. And that will dissolve. And it takes time. It's not like an instant wipe and it's away. So you need to sit that in vinegar. And unfortunately, after you sit it in vinegar, you have to rinse it a few times because then you get a vinegar flavor out of it. So the problem with Mr. Coffee is that it doesn't let the tea leaves steep in there in that hot water for long periods of time. You want it to steep, the tea leaves to steep in that water for that length of period. So that's really important. So that's what tends to be the Mr. Coffee Maker tends to be a big issue. On top of everything else, if the kettle is, or the coffee pot, whatever is what you're making tea in, don't forget that scent or that flavor of the tea can stay in that container. So it takes time. So you need to wash out that container or that kettle. So that's what tends to be a problem with a Mr. Coffee Maker or brewer. Okay, I hope that helps.
And there's another question about the cold brew.
Yeah.
So my parents like to drink it in hot days. Do I need to tell them not to drink hot brew? Yeah. So what happens is, so we actually have what we have in the labs. We actually advise people to do chilled brew. Okay. And what it is, in order to get to be fully honest with you, you can scientifically prove it. The only way to extract all the elements out of that tea is with hot water. Number one. So what happens is, what we often do in our labs, in the lab, is what we do is we steep it hot, let it cool down, and then put it into a container
into room temperature. Then we can put it in a refrigerator to let it chill. The reason that is because you don't want to lose the flavor. Number one, you do not want to lose the flavor. And number two, you have to let it cool down. That's the one thing that we aren't able to do, because if you're using a glass container and you chill that quickly, too quick, what happens is you're going to fracture, crack your container. So that is a big problem. So what we often suggest is to steep it warm or steep it hot, let it come down to room temperature, pour into a container, which you're going to actually gradually cool down in a refrigerator, and that's what we often suggest. In fact, Thomas, when I was on the Dragon Boat team and Team Taiwan, what often Thomas did every single year was he brought out tea after he hot steeped it, chilled it down, put it in bottles, and then we brought it out to the team to consume. So that was often what Thomas did on annual basis. He did that actually every single year. Okay.
Okay, so what if I heard I have a weak stomach? Can I drink tea?
Yeah. So what happens is, so when it comes to weak stomachs, you have to be cautious, and you know your body better than I do. Okay. I can teach a lot of classes on applied physiology to doctoral students and nurses and so forth. But the thing is that everybody's a little bit different. And so we often suggest is something that's a little bit more mild. We probably stay away from the ruby. We probably go for something like jade or something like a gold. Again, taken in small amounts, and see how you do progress throughout the entire day. It really depends on you, realistically, and you know yourself better than anyone else. Okay? Yeah. Are we good with our session? So anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. Please feel free to order more. They're online at Oolong Labs as well. And before I forget, when you're steeping water, making sure your water has a particular type of, is boiling only for water, okay? All my containers, especially if I'm brewing tea and so forth, it literally has a label on it that says for tea only. It doesn't have anything else. I don't mix coffee with my tea because I don't want the mixture of flavor, number one. If it's only for water, I make sure it's only water, obviously. So there are a lot of my thermos containers that actually has a label that says water only. And the reason I label this is because I don't want the flavors to be compromised. So I want to enjoy my tea as I do. A lot of people talk about teawares. Oh, I forgot about teaware. That's one thing I can talk about. I forgot to mention. Everyone can spend a lot of money on teaware. We're in Taiwan Center right now and in room number 5. And I'm going to tell you right now that this room, I have a friend that basically can fill this entire room with all their teaware. Okay? And it's not Thomas. Okay, or Josephine, okay? They probably could as well. But the thing is that the reason why you can spend a lot of money, and believe me, I have too, okay? I have gone on my, every year when I'm in, every year when I'm in Taiwan, I actually am looking at teaware. And do I need more teaware? Okay, do I buy more teaware? Maybe, it really depends. And the reason that is because we're like, yeah, we're gonna use that for fancy this and fancy that. Okay, to be honest with you, you don't need any of that, okay? You need a mug, okay? At most 2 mugs, right? So you can decant it or remove, and a pair of tongs to or chopsticks to remove your bag or your tea leaves. That's really all you need, realistically, and hot boiling water. I bought mason jars so that you can use it to display. Does everyone need a cupping set? No, you do not need a cupping set. Unless you're thinking of becoming a professional, tea judge and oolong judge, yeah, okay, maybe you want to practice at home, you can do that. I do that at home all the time. But I actually have to taste tea on a regular basis. That's my kind of a little bit my job a little bit. Okay, you don't need to have all the fancy wares. The problem with fancy tea wares is that you store it and it stays there collecting dust. Guilty. Okay, very guilty here. And then what happens is when you have to move it, you knock it off and then it shatters on the ground. You're like, oh no, I paid this much money for the ceramic, this and that, and it's like lost. You're like, and you lose it more so than gaining it. So unless you're drinking tea on a regular basis, take your time, purchasing what you want. Is it okay to get? Sure, but be very careful with the ceramics you buy. Know who makes it, know where it's coming from, and know the material that's going into making it. Because if you don't, what happens is it's a lot of it, especially from certain parts of the world, the regulations aren't so great. And so what happens is a lot of kind of toxic material that can come out of the ceramic bowls and tea containers and so forth, and it goes into our beverage, and then we consume that, and then we drink that. That can be a big problem. So do not go off on a shopping spree and saying, yeah, I'm going to buy all of that. It's going to look awesome in my home. Well, it can. It's great if you're serving guests and so forth. We don't really deal with teaware, to be honest with you. You can do that on your own. You can do on your own shopping spree, go on Amazon and do whatever. Not that I'm promoting Amazon, but do all the other things you want to get and go search for it. That's fine. We don't really kind of suggest any particular ones that you need to have, definitely. Just get a mug. The reason today was very different was because we want to do it for everyone, right? You don't need to be a tea specialist. You don't need to be a tea master. You know, I'm not a tea master, right? I'm a tea educator maybe at most. But the most is that what you want is you want to have your mug. And a lot of people have mugs at home, okay? To be honest with you, 15, 16 ounce mugs, we have that, right? Drinking your tea, drinking your coffee, drinking, I don't know, any other beverage you have at home. Not everyone has mason jars, but, you know, I went to school in the Midwest as well. And so we used to do a lot of jarring and canning. So what happens is we actually had a lot of jars around. I don't do jarring and canning as much as I used to when I was living in Wisconsin, I guess. But I do have a lot of mason jars around. They're easy to get. They're easily purchasable. And if I break one, I'm not going to cry, right? I just can go back to the store and get some more, right? And so those are really easy to do. So ceramic ware tends to be a big problem. A lot of people love it. They're awesome. There are some amazing tea wares that are out there. They look awesome and beautiful, you know, whatever you want to name, you want to call them. And that you can bring them out when you're trying to, you know, have fancy guests and or not so fancy guests maybe. There might be the distinguish between the type of tea wares and the type of friends you have. But when you're sharing and you're serving it, yeah, you want to have the best outlook. Sure, you can have your best ware, but realistically, if it's for every day, go with your mug, okay? Every single day. And you're not going to cry about it because you can wash it on a daily basis and then you can reuse it again. Teaware, if you wash it, you're like so delicate with it. It's like you want to put it in a display case. Yeah, go for it. You know, you can put it on a display case, but is it useful? You know, is it useful? You know, as an ornament, great. You know, but for me, I use a mug, to be honest with you. Right? I use a Pyrex pitcher to steep my teas and so forth. If I'm drinking large quantities of it during that day. Or if I'm doing personal tasting every single day, I'll put a satchel in a Gaiwan with a thermos of hot water and pour in it a couple minutes, let it steep a couple minutes, decant it, drink that out of a drinking cup, and then decant and then steep some more every couple minutes and do it over and over again throughout the entire day. You have to be cautious, and the reason that is because not everyone has that ability of having a Gaiwan next to them in front of their workstation and so forth. You know, over the years, depending on what course I'm teaching, and if I'm in front of things that are not inappropriate, I can't have beverages or food next to me. So I can't have that. Is it in my office? Not all the time. Why? Because I have a computer and things like that. You know, electronics, delicate, they can be a problem. You know, teaching things like have to deal with human bodies, obviously I don't have that. So that tends to be a big issue as well. So everyone is different. So my suggestion is to get mugs that you like, okay, that you don't have problems with, you know, and use it often. And then if you don't like it, get another mug, you know. You want to get fancy ware? Go get the fancy ware if you want to. It's not saying you don't get it. You can get it. It's just that if you're going to do it every day, you know, understand the cautions of it. There are really nice ones out there. Every year, like I said, when I'm in Taiwan, I look for ones and I look at particular stores and see if I can find ones that I would like to use as a display case, as a display item. But do I use it often? This is what I use, okay? To be honest with you, yeah. And this is what I use often, every day, right? Well, not every day. These, you know, once a week I do to my tea tasting, okay? Good. All right.
So we're gonna do a
raffle. We're gonna do a raffle. We're gonna do a raffle. We are gonna do a raffle. Apparently, there is a tea set, very similar to this. Do you want to hand it to me, or do you want?
Yes.
Don't trip. Okay. There's a raffle for one of these, and then two items. This and the set and the sets. In the set, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
two winners.
so one this and this. There's only three. My hand's only so big, so I can only carry two at the same time. So a set of this and a set of this. They're all these are a little bit different. That is the satchel ones, like we did tasting for today. And these are loose leaf teas. This is called the silver jasmine, the white peony, and the rose garden. And obviously, these were also presented by JT&T. And this is from Oolong Labs. So I think there's a raffle going on right now. I think there's a spinning wheel. Spinning wheel, spinning wheel. I have
Ready to spin?
Ready to spin? Let's spin.
Let's do it.
Actually, that coordinated pretty quickly. I was like, that's scary. I can't see. You're gonna have to tell me.
Grace Tan.
Grace Tam. Congratulations, Grace Tam. You get this. Yeah, you get this, Grace Tam. Okay, I'm holding this. Sorry. Okay. All right. Now I'm putting this down, and then I'm gonna do these three. Oops. Okay. And then I'm gonna spin the wheel again. I spin the wheel. And then we have, I can't see it. Eliza Liu. Congratulations, Eliza.
Yeah, Elisa is online.
Something online?
Yes. She is a backup student.
Oh, they just want to say that she's online, so she's.
Oh, she's online. Great. There you go.
Yeah, she's online.
Congratulations. Boom. There's your prize. All right. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed your Sunday session, tea session with me. I know it's not as long as we wanted, number one. Number two, I might have talked, spoken too quickly, number two. And then number three, you're not actually physically here, right? It's a little bit different when you're physically here, right? Yes, we do tea tastings when I'm physically in front of you. Actually, so we did a tea tasting. Thomas did a tea tasting over at the Taiwan Academy in West LA. And I brought some of my students did show up. Some of my nursing students did show up and came to taste. And so please, find some time, drink your teas. Keep on drinking your teas. Get more teas. And if you don't like it, get some more. So find the ones that you really like and hopefully you enjoy it, okay? So anyway, have a good Sunday.
All right. Hello? All right, let's thank Jerry and the Oolong Labs again. And then I would like to also thank our event sponsor, Chen and Fen Accountancy Corporation. And I see that many people are still online today. And I would like to say hi to Liao Fu Zhuren from the Qiaojiao Zhongxin, and also the president for Taiwanese American Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Lu's online. And the Taiwan 学校的校长 Jean is online as well. And also Polly and the fast class student. Thank you guys for joining the events. And many of the board members of the Taiwan Center. And also, lastly, please follow and like the Taiwanese American Heritage Week Facebook fan page to get more updated information about upcoming events. And we will have more exciting events coming up tomorrow and next weekend. All right, thank you very much. Enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. Oh, that's the echo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Should we do a group
Thank you,
photo?
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a group photo.
Let's do a group photo.
You just stay right there.
Stay right here.
Yes.
All right,
let's go.
3. Anybody still on? Want to turn on their screen? Welcome to join. Hi, Alvin. Hi, Leo. Thank you for coming.
Okay, perfect. That's good.
All right. 3, 2, 1. We good? All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.